What happens when a CEO puts on a dusty name tag and discovers one of his assistants is secretly running two jobs just to keep the store from falling apart? Elliot Ward didn't build the company from the ground up his father did. But after inheriting the chain of 9 home goods stores 3 years ago, Elliot had worked hard to modernize it without losing its heart. He was 39, sharp, and more comfortable behind spreadsheets than store counters. But lately, something had been eating at him. Customer reviews were slipping at Store 4, the one in Oak Ridge. Not terrible, just off. Delayed restocks, long lines, missed calls. Nothing big enough to raise alarms, but enough to make Elliot feel uneasy. The district manager, Clay, had brushed it off as a wave of new hires adjusting, but Elliot wasn't buying it. "I just want to see it for myself," he told his assistant, packing a duffel bag.
No cameras.
No heads up. Just me. He crafted a solid disguise: buzzed hair, thick-rimmed glasses, a little stubble, and a fake name tag that read Darren. He wore a cheap polo and khakis, the same as all new hires. No one at Store 4 had ever met him in person. Most store-level employees hadn't. It was a corporate chain, and Elliot had stayed mostly in HQ. Clay set it up like any other trainee day. "You'll start on stockroom tasks. Shadow someone named Mason for the morning. He's the assistant manager. Just keep your head down." When Elliot arrived, the store looked busy, but something felt tense. A teenage cashier fumbled with a receipt roll, and a woman in customer service was clearly overwhelmed. Then came Mason. He was young, mid-20s, tall, curly-haired, and wearing a name badge that said assistant manager. He looked sharp, but tired. Really tired. His smile was polite, but his eyes looked like he hadn't slept in a week. "You the new guy?" Mason asked, already walking toward the back. "Yeah, Darren."
Cool.
"I'll show you how to unpack the bath towels shipment. It's not hard, just repetitive." Elliot followed him into the stockroom and noticed the pace right away. Mason didn't walk, he moved.
Fast.
Efficient. In the span of 20 minutes, he taught Elliot how to scan, sort, and shelve.
No wasted motion.
He answered walkie-talkie calls like clockwork and handled a customer complaint over Bluetooth while lifting a box. "You always this busy?" Elliot asked, wiping sweat off his brow. Mason gave a short laugh. "Lately? Yeah. Short-staffed." "How short?" "Well, our manager quit 2 weeks ago. District says they're still looking. So, it's just me up front and back." Elliot paused.
Wait.
"You're doing both roles? Someone's got to keep the place from burning down." Mason didn't say it like he was proud. He said it like there wasn't another option. The rest of the day blurred past. Mason trained new hires, helped customers, unloaded a truck delivery, and still managed to fix a broken price scanner. Every time Elliot tried to pitch in, Mason was already 3 steps ahead. By noon, Elliot had to sit down in the break room. Mason walked in 5 minutes later, sipping a warm coffee from the morning. "You take a break yet?" Elliot asked him. Mason shook his head.
Can't.
"Kira called in sick, and I've got to cover cash for lunch rush." Elliot watched as Mason tossed back the rest of his coffee and headed out again. That night, Elliot checked the time clock system from his laptop at the hotel. Mason had clocked in at 6:30 that morning. He hadn't clocked out yet. Next day, Elliot worked the floor with him again. Same story. Mason filled every gap. When the store's scanner system crashed midday, he got it back online himself. When a young cashier panicked after a customer screamed at her for a pricing error, Mason stepped in, calmed the woman down, and let the cashier cry in the back for 5 minutes. Then he went back to breaking down boxes without missing a beat. Elliot saw it all. Felt it. On the 3rd day, something shifted. A man came in to return a cracked lamp. Mason explained the policy: store credit only after 30 days. The man exploded. "You think I'm lying? You calling me a liar?" the man yelled, raising his voice enough that customers turned. "No, sir. I'm just saying our return window is. Don't talk down to me. You're just some damn assistant." Mason's jaw clenched, but his voice stayed level. "I'm doing my best to help you." The man shoved the lamp onto the counter and stormed out, knocking over a display stand. Elliot helped Mason pick it up. "Why'd you let him talk to you like that?" "I don't have time to fight with people," Mason said, stacking the items back. "I've got a store to run." That night, Elliot sat in his car, watching the store lights switch off at 10:15. Mason was the last one out, locking up. He looked like his legs were made of lead. Elliot leaned back in the seat, exhausted just from watching him. He pulled out his phone. "Clay," he said when the district manager picked up.
"We need to talk."
"You didn't tell me Store 4 doesn't have a manager." "Well, Mason's been holding it down, so I figured." "You figured wrong. He's drowning."
Clay sighed.
"We've been trying to find someone, but no one wants to take a lower volume store for that pay." Elliot didn't respond. Back in his hotel room, he stared at the ceiling for a long time. He thought about his father, about how the man used to say, "You don't learn what a store needs from a report. You learn it from being behind the counter." Tomorrow, Elliot decided it was time to act. By the time Elliot walked into the store that morning, Mason was already wheeling out the cleaning supplies cart, lugging a mop bucket behind him. The air carried that faint industrial lemon scent, and the store hadn't even opened yet. Elliot slipped into the back hallway without a word, blending in like he had the past few days. He watched Mason wipe down the customer service counter before unlocking the front doors. The bell above the entrance chimed as early customers trickled in. An older woman asked about a discontinued lampshade. A young guy came in looking for moving boxes. Mason answered both in stride. But Elliot wasn't here to observe anymore. He walked over to the employee room and grabbed the schedule clipboard. He studied the sheet. 4 people for the entire day. 2 part-time cashiers, 1 teenager on her second week, and Mason. That was it. No floor lead. No stock associate. Not even a supervisor. The schedule for the week looked the same. Mason's name filled almost every opening and closing shift. Elliot knew what that meant. Mason wasn't just doing 2 roles. He was the only reason this store hadn't collapsed. He walked back out, watching as Mason trained the new girl on how to adjust shelf tags between helping a customer find a wall hook set. He caught Elliot's eye for a second. "You good with loading the curtain rods in aisle 4? Mason asked. "Sure." Elliot nodded. "You got a minute, though?" "Not really," Mason said, grabbing a wireless scanner from the desk. "We've got a price audit due by noon." Elliot followed him down the aisle, keeping his voice low. "You ever talk to district about how much you're covering?" Mason scanned a tag, adjusted a label, and responded without looking up. "What would be the point?" "Accountability." Mason stopped, finally turning to him. "You really think anyone at corporate's counting my hours?" Elliot didn't answer. Mason shook his head slightly and kept moving. By mid-morning, Elliot had taken over the stock cart, trying to give Mason a little breathing room. His hands were raw from opening boxes, but he didn't stop. If Mason could do it daily, Elliot could push through 1 shift. At noon, a truck arrived. The delivery driver looked annoyed. "You're the only one unloading?" he asked Mason. "Just stack it by the dock." "I'll sort it." "You're gonna be here all night, man." Mason didn't reply. He just grabbed the pallet jack and started moving. Elliot stepped in without asking. He took the opposite end of the pallet and helped guide it through the narrow hallway. They worked in silence for a while. The stockroom was a maze of half-open boxes, and the fluorescent light flickered every few minutes. Elliot noticed a small fan clipped to the wall, pointed toward nothing. Mason must have moved it at some point and never readjusted. After 20 minutes, Mason finally leaned back against the wall, catching his breath. "You don't have to be back here, you know," he said. "I know. You're not getting paid extra." "I'm not here for the pay." Mason looked at him for a second, squinting like something didn't quite add up. "You worked retail before?" "Little bit. Long time ago." Mason nodded slowly, then pushed himself off the wall. "Guess it sticks with you," he muttered. They kept working. By 3, Mason got called to the front for a register issue. Elliot stayed in the back to finish sorting. He was crouched near a box of light fixtures when he heard someone behind him. "You're not really new, are you?" Elliot looked up. It was the teenage cashier, the one who'd been shadowing Mason earlier in the week. Her name tag read Jules. "I've seen you type into the inventory tablet faster than anyone I know," she said. "And you knew where the folding step stools were without even looking it up." Elliot exhaled slowly. "You're observant. You're corporate, aren't you?" "Yeah." She blinked. "Like corporate? I'm the CEO." Jules stared at him for a full beat, then looked toward the hallway. "Does Mason know?" "Not yet." "You're gonna tell him?" Elliot stood up, brushing dust from his knees. "Today." Jules hesitated, then said, "He's not gonna like it." "I know." She started to leave, then paused. "He's not just tired," she said. "He's worn out." She left before he could respond. Elliot walked to the front, where Mason was fixing a misread barcode. The line had built up again. Jules was at register 2, scanning slowly but carefully. Mason gave her a nod of encouragement, then turned back to Elliot. "I'll cover the rest of this lane. Can you check aisle 11? Someone spilled paint samples again." Elliot didn't move. He looked at Mason, really looked. "We need to talk." In the back. Mason didn't argue. He just followed. They stepped into the break room, the air inside faintly stale from a microwave burrito someone had nuked and forgotten. Elliot shut the door. "I owe you a truth," he said quietly. "I'm not Darren." Mason crossed his arms, waiting. "My name's Elliot Ward. I run this company." Mason blinked once. His mouth didn't open. He just stared. "I came here because none of the reports made sense. I wanted to see it for myself. Still nothing. I've seen what you've done here. All week. You've kept this place standing by yourself." Mason finally spoke. "You pretended to be a trainee? I needed the truth. Not a filtered version." Mason stepped back, jaw tight. "You could have just asked." "I did. I asked the district manager. He told me things were fine." Mason laughed once. No humor in it.
"Yeah.
That tracks." "I'm not proud of how I did it," Elliot said. "But I'm glad I saw it firsthand." Mason sat down in the plastic chair by the fridge, rubbing his temples. "You gonna fire me?"
No.
"Good. Because I'd quit anyway." Elliot sat across from him. "You've gone above and beyond for weeks. Maybe longer. You've kept your team steady. You've trained new hires. You've made decisions no assistant manager should ever have to make alone." Mason didn't respond. "You deserve recognition. But more than that, you deserve rest." Mason looked up. "I'm giving you a week off.
Paid.
Starting tomorrow." Mason blinked. "You're serious?" "Completely." "And the store?" "I'm flying in 2 float managers tonight. They'll cover while we get you proper staff." Mason leaned back, eyes closed for a moment. "And when I come back? You'll be coming back as store manager. Full title. Full pay." Backdated to when the last one walked out. There was a long silence. "Why me?" Mason asked. "Because you didn't let the ship sink. Even when no one helped you." Mason stood slowly. He looked down at the floor, then back at Elliot. "I didn't do it for recognition." "I know." He nodded once. "I'll take the week. But only if my team gets back up while I'm gone." "They will," Elliot said. Mason didn't smile, but his shoulders loosened. "I'll finish the shift," he said. "Then I'll go." Elliot stood, offering his hand. "Thank you. For everything." Mason shook it. Firm. Steady. Then he walked out back into the store like he always did. But for the first time all week, Elliot saw something shift in the way he moved. Not lighter. Not slower. Just human again. The next morning, Elliot arrived at store 4 just after sunrise, a clipboard under one arm and a black coffee in his hand. The parking lot was still mostly empty. He walked through the rear entrance, where the overhead lights hadn't fully warmed up yet. The stockroom was quiet. For the first time all week, Mason wasn't there. It felt strange, wrong, almost. Like the heartbeat of the building had stopped. Elliot stepped into the break room and placed the clipboard on the table. A second later, the back door swung open, and Jules walked in wearing her hoodie backwards, an energy drink in one hand. "He actually left," she said, not looking surprised. "He did," Elliot replied. Took some convincing. She opened the fridge, pulled out a yogurt, and leaned against the counter. He texted me at 3 this morning. Said he felt like he was abandoning the ship. He's not. He thinks he is. Elliot sat down and opened the folder on the clipboard. Inside were staffing plans and shift adjustments. 2 interim managers, one from Store 2, another from the central training team, were arriving by noon. They wouldn't fix everything, but they'd keep the store functional while Elliot worked on a longer-term plan. Jules peeled the lid off her yogurt. So, what happens now? We pretend everything's fine.
No.
We fix it. She nodded once, then walked out without another word. By midday, the 2 float managers had arrived. Kara, from Store 2, took over floor operations. She was direct, mid-40s, and moved with purpose. The second, Devin, was younger but sharp. He'd been on the corporate training team for 3 years and knew how to plug holes quickly. Elliot gathered the staff for a 5-minute huddle near the seasonal aisle just after lunch. The turnout was thin: just Jules, a cashier named Ronnie, and a college student named Naomi, who worked weekends but had picked up an extra shift to help out. Most of the others were new or hadn't lasted more than a few days. I'm not going to make a speech, Elliot said, holding the folder against his chest. But I want you to know we saw what was happening here. And we're making changes. Ronnie raised a hand, hesitant. Are we getting more people?
Yes.
Starting next week, we're transferring 3 experienced associates from other stores to help stabilize things. We're also reopening the hiring pool for part-time support. Naomi shifted her weight from one foot to the other. People quit because the pay's not worth the stress, she said. No one wants to do 3 jobs for minimum. We're reviewing compensation across all stores. Not just here. Jules crossed her arms. Is that a real promise or a corporate one? It's a decision I've already made. The rollout begins next quarter. She didn't reply, but she didn't look away either. The huddle broke, and they returned to their posts. Elliot stayed back, watching as Kara moved through the aisles, correcting mislabeled end caps and reassigning tasks with calm authority. Devin was already in the back, reorganizing shipment logs and building a better intake schedule. For the first time all week, the store felt like it had scaffolding. Still, Elliot knew that none of this addressed the core issue. They'd relied too heavily on people like Mason. People who stepped up without being asked and then were left there alone. At 4, Clay arrived. Elliot met him near the office. You didn't tell me the full story, Elliot said, arms folded. Clay glanced around, his voice low. I told you what I thought you needed to hear. Don't do that again. Clay nodded, jaw tense. I'll take full responsibility. You already are. Elliot handed him the staffing folder. You're reassigning yourself. Effective today. Devin's taking interim district oversight until we find a replacement.
Clay didn't argue.
He paused, gave a short nod, and walked out without saying anything else. Elliot exhaled slowly and stepped into the office. The door clicked shut behind him. He sat at the small desk, glanced around at the pile of vendor mail and half-used notebooks, and then opened his laptop. He drafted a company-wide memo, laying out the staffing reforms, the compensation review, and a new support system for assistant managers operating without store leads. He didn't use buzzwords. He didn't talk about synergy or optimization.
He talked about people.
About the cost of silence. About what happens when dedication is mistaken for capacity. He hit send. At closing that night, he stayed behind with Jules and Ronnie to tidy the last of the front displays. They worked quietly. The store lights dimmed as the timer switched to after-hours mode. Jules finally broke the silence. Did you always want to run a company? No, Elliot said. I wanted to be an architect. She looked over, surprised. Seriously? Yeah. I liked building things. Solving puzzles. So what changed? My dad got sick. I stepped in to help with the business. 1 year turned into 10. She nodded slowly. You still get to build things, she said. Elliot looked around. The shelves were neater. The floor was clean. Kara had left detailed notes for tomorrow's openers. The registers balanced. Maybe, he said. but I need to be better at maintaining them. Ronnie locked up the register drawer and called goodnight. Jules followed close behind, grabbing her backpack from under the service counter. Elliot stayed behind, pulling the chain across the entrance and locking the doors. Outside, the parking lot was quiet again, the sky a fading blue. He returned to the break room and picked up the envelope he'd left earlier. Inside was a handwritten note and a check made out to Mason. Not a bonus disguised as PR. Not a token gift card with a thank you message. Actual recognition. A number that reflected the weeks he'd held the line without support. Elliot would deliver it personally when Mason returned. Until then, the store had a team again. Not a perfect one, but a functional one. And for the first time since he'd walked in disguised as Darren, Elliot felt like he could leave without wondering what would fall apart next. He turned off the light, shut the door behind him, and stepped into the night. Mason returned the following Monday, walking through the back door with a duffel over one shoulder and a quiet, unsure expression on his face. The store wasn't fixed, not even close, but it was balanced. The stockroom no longer looked like a shipping container explosion, and the front end had a steady rhythm to it. There was still too much to do, but the panic was gone. He walked past the break room without stopping, heading straight to the floor. Aisle 9 was fully stocked. The end caps were labeled correctly. Even the seasonal display looked intentional instead of thrown together. Elliot was waiting in the office, reading over a printed report. He didn't stand when Mason appeared in the doorway, just looked up and nodded once. "You're early," Elliot said. "Didn't sleep much. You didn't need to come until noon. Didn't feel right sitting around." Elliot set the paper aside. "Take a seat." Mason stepped in, closed the door behind him, and sat across the desk. The seat creaked slightly under him. "I didn't expect a vacation," he said. "You didn't get one. You got a reset." Mason leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I checked emails while I was out. Saw the memo. Compensation changes, staffing rollout. You're really doing all that? Already started? We'll need your help as we move things forward." Mason didn't respond right away. His eyes shifted toward the calendar on the wall, then back to Elliot. "So, what's my role now?" "You're store manager. Officially. Contracts being finalized today. Comes with a title bump, salary adjustment, and more autonomy." Mason frowned slightly. "Autonomy. You'll have direct input on who you bring in, how you schedule your team, and what tools you need. I'm not interested in watching you hold this place together with duct tape again." Mason looked down at his hands, fingers tapping together quietly. "I didn't ask for a promotion. You earned one, whether you wanted it or not." Mason gave a small nod, then stood. "Do I have time to walk the floor before I sign anything?" Elliot gestured toward the door.
"Go."
"Take it in." Mason walked the store in silence. Jules was working the returns desk, calmly walking an elderly man through a refund process. Ronnie was resetting the end cap under Devon's guidance. The new hires from the other stores were moving stock in teams of 2, not alone. In aisle 4, Mason found Kara adjusting a shelf bracket. "You holding the place together without me?" he asked. She stood up, brushing her hands off. "Barely," she said. "But we kept it standing." Mason nodded. "Thanks." "Don't thank me," she replied. "Thank the guy who pulled you off the floor before you passed out." Mason didn't respond. She didn't expect him to. He returned to the office an hour later with a clipboard in hand and a list of small but necessary changes, things only someone who knew the building's bones would catch. Elliot was still at the desk, reading emails. "I want to fix the receiving routine," Mason said. "We're logging inventory twice when we don't need to. Also, that back fan's still not aimed at anything." Elliot looked up.
"Done."
"And I need one more part-timer. Not to fill a gap, but to train right. Someone who can grow into a lead." "You'll get them." Mason sat again, slower this time. "I don't want this to be a one-week fix." "It's not. I mean for anyone. Not just here. Anywhere else someone's holding the roof up alone." Elliot nodded. "That's the point." Mason looked over at the window. In the reflection, he saw the store behind him. It looked smaller than he remembered. Or maybe just less overwhelming. Elliot reached into a drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope. He slid it across the desk. What's this? Recognition. Not a performance bonus. Not a retention bribe. Just acknowledgement. Mason didn't open it. Can I use it however I want? You can burn it if you want. I won't stop you. Mason smiled for the first time in days. Not wide. Just enough to be real. I'll probably fix the brakes on my car. Sounds like a solid investment. Mason tucked the envelope into his jacket. I'm not used to anyone noticing. That's a problem we're fixing. He stood again, this time without hesitation. All right, Mason said. Let's get to work. Elliot followed him out. They didn't walk side by side. Mason went ahead, already pointing out a misplaced inventory cart and gesturing to Ronnie about a shelf issue. He belonged here, but on his terms now, not as a last line of defense. Elliot stayed near the front, watching as the team moved together in a kind of quiet coordination. Nothing dramatic. No applause. Just people doing their jobs with a little more breathing room. Hey.
He turned.
Jules was standing beside him, arms crossed. You're not just here for show, are you? I was. Not anymore. She nodded toward Mason. You picked the right guy. I didn't pick him, Elliot said. He picked this place. I just finally saw it. She grinned and walked off, headset crackling with some small request from the back room. Elliot walked toward the exit. He stopped at the threshold, turned once more to look at the store. The lights weren't harsh today. The aisles were clean. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And that was enough. He stepped outside into the late afternoon light.
No fanfare. No send-off.
But as he reached his car, he glanced back once more and saw Mason through the glass, crouched beside a new hire, showing her how to adjust a faulty shelf bracket with a rubber mallet and a little leverage. Not barking orders. Not rushing. Teaching. And in that moment, Elliot understood something his father had tried to teach him years ago. Leadership isn't about how much you carry. It's about what you leave standing when you finally put it down. And Mason? He'd left something standing. Now, finally, it was time to build from it.